Hi, this is Bay McFarland with Mary's Advocates, and I've been corresponding with a gentleman I have here, Mike Dycus, for golly, has it been like 2 or 3 years? It's hard to keep straight. Um, he's the guy in Nebraska who had recorded what was happening when he got kicked out of his home because in a no-fault divorce, the courts take over the property. So he recorded the day that the sheriffs were at his house making him leave. And now he's in a situation where he has decided that he is going to risk going to jail. And he's got the paperwork recently that told him that he has to go to jail for a month because he's not cooperating with the divorce. Mike, say hi to all of everybody.
Hi, Bay.
Hey. So, Mike, with Mary's Advocates, I've been covering no fault divorce for a while. So, in your situation, your wife filed for divorce, was it like 2 years ago?
Yeah, 2 years ago, last November.
And then in your state, they'll give a divorce to anybody. Do you remember offhand what were the no fault grounds in Nebraska? Was it irretrievable breakdown or irreconcilable or?
Irretrievable breakdown, I believe, yes.
Okay, so all she has to do is say that. And then you never went to the courtroom at all, right?
No.
And how did you get away with that?
I I talked to my lawyer, Bob Sullivan, who did a wonderful job in representing me, and he just made that clear that I respect the law, but I just couldn't bring myself to go into a divorce court and spar with my wife. We've been married for 33 years with 4 children, and I just didn't want to do that.
And you shared that the transcript is public record, so I did get my hands on that from, I can't remember if I got it from you or from the court, I don't remember. But it's just a discussion where one party goes in there and says, yeah, the marriage is broken. We tried counseling, but it doesn't work. But the person refuses to participate in ongoing counseling, and then the court will issue the divorce. They take over all your property. You don't have any minor children, right? So children weren't involved.
Right.
And your court order said that the way they were going to split the property was your wife gets your marital home.
Correct.
And then what's happened in the last couple months that's put you in this situation where you're risking jail in the civil court?
Right. I got a notice in the mail, and I never did see the official notice, but I guess it was in our local paper, that I was being sued again because I would not sign papers giving her the home and our mutual funds. And I just, from the beginning, I just cannot cooperate in any way with this divorce. And to do that, to give away my hard-earned money and property is something I just can't do.
So because you didn't sign those papers, you didn't show up to talk about not signing those papers where you're turning over the property, voluntarily turning over the property, mind you. I mean, basically, it's a court telling you to do what we ask you to do. But as far as the financial institutions are concerned, I don't think they even care why it is that you sign some paper reneging ownership. They just see, okay, you signed the paper reneging ownership. You'll find out if you ever do it, but you don't sound like you're going to. So, so that's why. So because you didn't do that, now you're faced with this 30-day jail thing. Now you work for yourself, and you can kind of be flexible about when you work. You're a contractor, right? You do
Correct.
in
Yes.
in the painting business. I'm kind of hoping that people who will watch this will be like all the people who bought chicken. What was the chicken place that came out, either pro-life or
Chick-fil-A.
Yes. Chick-fil-A got more business than ever. So maybe you'll get more business than ever because there's a lot of people in your community that will respect what you're doing because they appreciate that no fault divorce is insane and wicked. At least coerced no fault divorce. So do you think
I would like to make clear too, Beck. I don't relish this at all, and I don't want to do this. I don't think anybody in their right mind wants to go to jail. But at some point, I said to myself, I just can't cooperate with this any further, and I hope the outcomes are good as far as the business and those types of thinkings. But it's really about the principle that I want to uphold here. So,
do you think? Have you talked to anybody or got any clue about whether you're going to have to stay there 24/7, or are you going to be like those people that are kind of like on house arrest? Maybe you'll be able to go out during the day to work. Do you know? Or you,
They do have a program for those in the county jail that they can get a work release. Um, so I'm hoping that will be the case with me being an independent owner of a business, that I could go out and conduct business during business hours and reside there at the jail in the evening. So that's my hope.
wow. And it's not like you're going to a big federal prison that we see in the movies where people get attacked and those kinds of things. I hope.
No, I just watched Shawshank Redemption here again recently, and it's not like that. So
Okay, okay. So at least you'll be bored silly. You won't have freedom to move around, but you're doing it on principle. We'll talk about more about why you're motivated to do that. I wanted to also talk a little about what your experience was in the church system because you and your wife. Part of why I was interested as Mary's Advocates in your situation is because you and your wife publicly appear to care about being viewed as regular good Catholics, and you were married in the Catholic Church, and you had all these kids, and you were involved in Catholic things while your kids were growing up. So it's not like you're Easter, Christmas Catholics. You were the real McCoy, and in the church. Now this is where, I mean, how do you want to explain what happened with you in the church?
yeah, that's kind of a sad deal too. I'm disappointed in the way things worked out there. As you know, you helped me initially try to get some help with my marriage by petitioning our diocese for some help.
And that wasn't a case for investigation of a case about separation of spouses, because people who are married in the Catholic Church are obligated to maintain an intact home where both parties are helping each other out around the home. But there are some circumstances that get severe enough where there could be a legitimate reason for separation. So Mary's Advocates has a petition on our website. Generally, it's used for people where someone is an abandoner, but you were raising the question, is the tension in our home so severe that it justifies separation? And you didn't want to make that determination by yourself. You wanted the church to intervene. And it's kind of like that biblical principle where your brother sins against you, you talk to them first, maybe you bring witnesses or friends, and then if that doesn't work, you bring it to the church. And we do have this set of canon laws that I would say are collecting dust. So you brought this case. I was aware of that, and the outcome you got was a shock because you were just asking for an investigation about whether the situation is severe enough to justify temporary separation, and that would certainly include a conclusion about what is the severe situation and whoever's causing this severe situation. That's not virtuous behavior, and the hope would be that that person would work on improving, getting the right kind of help, kind of minimize that so people can strengthen their marriage. And you and I have talked about this. There's these great resources like the Alexander House or Dr. Richard Fitzgibbons. If people cooperate with a pro-marriage, whether you call it a coach or a counselor or a psychologist, they can be happier at the other end. And that's what you wanted. But instead,
right.
That's not what you got. Oh.
Exactly. I was really shocked when I got the answer in the way of the Neil Hill Obstadt letter. And I might say too, our pastor was the person who was in charge of delivering that letter to each of us. And the day that he was going to give it to me, we met in my shop for, about 2 hours. And this was our third meeting, and I know he had already met with my wife previously, I think on at least 2 different occasions. And he concluded that meeting by saying that he was going to tell my wife she was failing to live her promises. So I had hope at that point. A week later, I emailed him, and he said he had called her, and she just did not want to talk to him at all, and basically hung up on him. So, and then she eventually ended up filing for divorce. So.
Well, and from what I recall, the document that came from the church said, we give both parties permission to go to the divorce court.
Right.
And we'll talk more. I'll point out some things out on the internet. But from all my research findings, Catholics are not supposed to be going to divorce court on their own authority because it involves children, it involves the other spouse, it involves the society at large. I'll get into that more later. So your wife, when you're having marital tensions, gets this notice from some higher up in the church diocese that says you both have permission to go to divorce court, and then that happened before she filed for divorce?
Yes.
So we don't know. Maybe she never would have filed if she never got that. We don't know.
It makes me wonder. Our pastor told me after meeting with her that he made the comment, I don't think either one of you want a separation or a divorce. So
yeah, so
then conclusion. Yeah.
So then you had pointed out to me some things that you had read out there, especially church teaching, that really got you thinking, what are you going to do? You either sign these papers that say, basically, I voluntarily renege my own rights to the property I've earned my whole life. And here you are choosing between signing those papers, which you feel like would be like a complicit with a lie or something. I want to share some stuff on the internet, starting with the Catechism, because, what does the Catechism say about divorce? And, how does that relate to...
Right.
I'm having a question about my computer right now. I'm trying to do screen sharing, and it's telling me stop sharing. That's curious. So I'm going to do it again. Share screen. I'm not quite sure why I said that. So what I've got here, on Mary's Advocates, I've collected all sorts of research findings. And the one about divorce is, from the Catechism, section 2384 to 2386. Divorce is immoral and a grave offense against nature. Or it brings grave harm to the deserted spouse, to the children. The children are traumatized by a separation of their parents and often torn between the parents. And also, divorce does a grave harm because of its contagious effect, which makes it truly a plague on society. It's only tolerable in situations delimited in canon law. And there's a grave difference between the party that forces divorce and an innocent party abandoned. Does any of that just resonate with you and motivate you that you're not going to sign those papers?
Absolutely. Everything you just read. The Catechism is crystal clear on the indissolubility of a Catholic sacramental marriage. And I believe ours is, we've got 35 years together and 4 children, and there's no doubt in my mind we are in a sacramental marriage. And being forced to go through the meat grinder that is civil divorce is something that I felt I was kind of bullied into and coerced, and it's brought us to this point where I cannot cooperate. I haven't from the beginning, and I won't cooperate now. So.
And then the item here about divorce is only tolerable in situations delimited in canon law. This is where I found, Canon 1151 to 1155 talk about what are these grounds for legitimate separation of spouses who are married in a Catholic rite. Adultery is the only ground for permanent separation. Making marital life unduly difficult or being dangerous are other grounds. And those are temporary. They could be for an indeterminate period of time until someone resolves the issue. But anyone who's married in a Catholic marriage is obligated to try to find the right time to kind of help. And what I find is these people who are filing for divorce, who they refuse to cooperate with experts, they're not interested. They'll say, oh, I tried. But to say that counseling failed because I quit, that's just not very credible. So here canon law talks about when it's tolerable to go to the divorce court. And a big piece of that is that you're supposed to have an outside investigation by the church. And, I get it. The church has been run over by the sexual revolution. The church has got people inside of it that are kind of blinded by sexual revolution ideas. So I get it. This isn't going to be solved next week. But there's something wrong going on. So, here you are. If you sign those papers, you feel like you are collaborating, you're contributing to, you're agreeing to something that's immoral and a grave offense against nature.
Right. And it's also taken my property away unjustly, I feel.
Yeah, and in the civil forum, one of the things that I know Bob Sullivan talked about it in the lower court level, whether how deep he got into it on the appellate level is a different situation. But in no fault divorce, the defendants have no due process rights. You're never told what exactly is it that you're accused of doing that was a violation of some obligation that you had. You never have a right to defend because there's no accusation made. Someone can just on their own decide our marriage feels irretrievably broken or we feel incompatible. It's really quite tragic. So
Right.
I want to move on to something else that I've got here. There was an article in the Washington Post about your case when an appeal was in front of the state Supreme Court, and your wife lawyer says I'd be absolute. Let's see. We were talking about God forbid that a woman be able to get rid of a man. Wait, I might be reading that upside down. Okay, if they need to have the way it is right now. God forbid that a woman be able to get rid of a man without having to show that he beat her or cheated on her.
Pretty sad. And I think doesn't canon law in those two instances allow for a separation?
Yeah, it does. And if you were beating your wife, people would know about it. And I mean,
Right.
so it's just like the divorce mentality. He just caught it here.
He did.
It would
Absolutely.
be so horrible that a woman not be able to get rid of a man without having to show that he beat her or cheat on her. Women have to be able to get rid of man. So for every reason and no reason whatsoever. There was something else in this article that struck me, and it was they interviewed, or they said they interviewed, whether your wife gave this or not, but this quote is attributed to something that they said she wrote. So, maybe her lawyer helped her write it or rewrote it. We don't know. But your wife says, more than 2 years ago, I sought and was granted permission by the bishop of my diocese to approach the civil courts to settle the effects of divorce. Now, did you, I already know the answer, but if she had sought permission from the diocesan authority to approach the civil courts, did you ever get notice of that?
No, I never did.
Of course not. We know you didn't. And that's, again, everything I've seen about canon law, the obligation to maintain a marital home and an intact home is very serious. You can't just have that ripped out from under you without due process. And the church also has
Right.
due process. So, if your wife was alleging that you did something like adultery that might have justified permanent separation, which is the only reason she'd really need to go to the civil divorce court, she could have gotten a temporary separation if there was other reasons that were temporary. But you never got notified of anything. And,
Nothing.
I appreciate, the diocesan personnel might never have been approached with this kind of canon law case before. But people, this is just, so the Washington Post is telling the world that, your wife says that the bishop gave her permission to approach the courts, but the Washington Post didn't mention that your due process rights were violated in the church forum also.
Right.
And then, more stuff. What I've got here is a view of Pope St. John Paul II's 2002 address to the Roman Rota. And he was even saying about how terrible divorce is, that he doesn't even want Catholics who are lawyers to have as a client somebody whose purpose is the breakup of their marriage. And, what was your wife's purpose from all you understand? Is she pleading with you? Oh, Mike, I really love you, and I'm so sorry we're having these problems, and I'm pleading with you. Please come with me to this whatever kind of stress management, anger management, I don't know, whatever issue she's complaining about.
Yeah, unfortunately, that conversation never happened. The last 11 months leading up to her leaving and filing for divorce were basically ignoring me.
Which is just sad. So,
yeah.
So now I kind of want to get into more asking you, this is to a lot of people, being willing to go to jail versus putting your signature on some papers sounds like that doesn't make any sense. So, How did you discern this? How did you come to peace with this decision?
Yeah, I prayed about it and discerned. I was really looking and asking from God for signs uh, that may give me a hint what to do one way or another. And I did get a couple different signs from two different places. About maybe a couple weeks ago, my Bishop Conley made a video, and they had a little clip from that video where he talked about we might have to be either red or white martyrs, with the COVID deal and the lockdowns and not being able to worship as Catholics. And I just applied that to my situation. I'm a Catholic who is being unjustly divorced or has been unjustly divorced in the civil court. And I believe my religious and both civil rights were trampled there. And, just becoming aware of, just how evil and prominent it is across the country. I never looked for it, but I guess that's where I'm at, and I'm going to make a stand for it. And also, you had sent something a week ago, a rosary meditation that talked about speaking up in the public realm, having the courage to do that. And that just kind of solidified, my thinking about making a stand. That was very good.
Have you corresponded with any priests about this, just explaining the situation we're in and asking their opinion on whether this would be?
I have, yes. I talked with 3 different priests whom I really respect, and 2 out of 3 said, you're perfectly fine, doing what you're doing, not signing papers and everything. And one priest called it heroic virtue, but I don't see it as that at all. I think many people, if they understood what actually goes on, would do the same thing as I'm doing. So.
Well, and you raise a point there. If people understood what was going on, when I first got involved in this work, I saw so many times, written or for some priest perspective, that when spouses get divorced, when parties get divorced, with plural, husband and wife, he and she, as if it's something that's mutually agreed. And what I saw is, defendants, it's not really agreement. A lot of the times it's coercion. So there's a public record. If you hadn't gone the route you had gone and you go the route that a lot of people go, the public record shows, husband and wife mutually agreed to divorce and they split their property and children in this way, and they agreed to this kind of separation, this kind of support plan. But it's coercion. But nobody knows about the coercion because everyone's doing it. So it's like until somebody stands up and says, wait a minute, do you know what's going on down here? I don't see how it's going to change. I don't see how it's going to change.
Yeah, I hope I agree with you 100%, and I'm doing this based upon principle. But a side effect is that I hope it sets a fair example for others who have gone through the same thing or will go through it, and perhaps look at this as something that they might consider. So, although that's secondary, I hope that happens.
Well, from what I understand, when people are in jail, they might not be able to bring a lot of personal items. I don't know, books or reading. So I had asked if you could find, and I wrote it down here, and I think I'll post it when I put a blog out on this. If someone wants to send you any reading material, because I was thinking of Cardinal Pell. He was in jail all that time, and he said it was kind of like a retreat. So here you are going into Lent. When does your sentence start? Do you know when it starts?
I have until this next Wednesday to cooperate and sign over the papers and the mutual funds. And the order said that I may be sentenced to court. So, there's a possibility that somebody may relent there. But I think anytime after this next Wednesday, I could be arrested and sent to jail. So
yeah, kind of like that day you came home and there was a notice on your front door that says if you step past this doorway, you're criminally trespassing, and the local sheriffs are enforcing the order. So, you could show up at your shop, or you could come home one day, and they could be there saying, hey, we've got this order, and you're going to kind of, like with that order, you weren't being recalcitrant and bitter. You're just like, I know you're doing your job, so that might happen to you. Or maybe you'll just decide to go to the courthouse yourself and say, well, I'm here reporting in, don't want to waste anybody's taxpayer money.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, that's the feeling.
Wow. Okay. Well, in case you do end up going there, I asked you to give us the address. So it's the courthouse in the jail, or the jail in the courthouse, 500 West 4th Street, Hastings, that's Hastings.
Correct.
Nebraska, 68901.
That's correct.
If somebody wants to send you Cardinal Pell's book, or some cards, or something to read, or whatever they'll let go through, I'm pretty sure you can't send a package directly. So it's like, order the book from the bookseller and have them forward it to Mike, because jail might not want public people sending packages. I don't know. Or call the jail and ask some questions and figure it out. There were some other items I wanted to talk about that were out on the internet. One was this article. Okay, so like, who else was a support to you during all of this? And when someone experiences suffering, if they go through it the way God wants us to experience suffering, God, he promises in Romans 8:28, God promises to bring good out of all things for those who love him. So I've got Layla Miller's up here next to her book Primal Loss in National Catholic Register. Can you just talk a little bit about, what good have you experienced, even though this is terrible suffering, to have your wife abandon the marriage?
Right. Through this ordeal, I met some very good, honest, genuine people. You were at the top of the list, and, Bob Sullivan, for what he did to step out and represent me, risking his reputation and so on and so forth, is very admirable. Lila Miller, what she's doing is fabulous, giving the real victims of divorce, a voice there. She's been helpful, conversing back and forth. Jeff Morgan from down in Texas, who's gone through this, is very active across the country, trying to get justice for these people that are unjustly have been a victim of no-fault divorce. He's a very good man.
Carol?
Carol Vaklavicek is another one. She's very articulate. The last two, Carol and Jeff, are both Protestant, but they think just as we do about the indissolubility of marriage and its permanence, and how unjust the no-fault civil divorce courts are. So some very good people I've met. They're honest and genuine, and kind of people you'd like to have as friends. So
yeah, I gotta say, since
go ahead.
I gotta say the same thing has happened with me. My husband and I were real involved in different Catholic things, and I thought I was rubbing shoulders with. I thought I was rubbing shoulders with good people, but the people I've met in upholding marriage, from all different walks of life, all different perspectives of how they practice their Catholicism, it really is. It's like I'm honored to know you. It's like, wow.
Right.
So Layla Miller is one of these people, and in her book Primal Loss, what she did is she had a blog out on the internet, and she ended up, through personal conversation, talking to a friend who grew up in a divorced home, and started learning that there was a lot of garbage that these people kept quiet about, and there was kind of a pressure to keep quiet about it, a lot of pain there, keep quiet about it. So she asked out on the internet, does anyone want to tell their story as an adult person who grew up in a divorced home? And she compiled their stories, and they're just, heart-wrenching. Anyone who contacts me whose spouse is considering divorce, I say, if you've got kids, have them read this book, because nobody would want to do to their children what these people experienced growing up. It's like, no, figure it out. And then, go ahead.
No, I was going to say I've given away several copies of that book. Each one of my children have it, and I gave it to every person in the chancery here in my diocese. So they have it.
Yeah, so the chanceries aren't calling you and I and asking how to come up with policies, but I hope that in coming years it gets recognized that the state's understanding of marriage obligations is so opposite to the church understanding of marriage obligations that it's just unacceptable to send people to the divorce court to to solve what they call the civil effects or the effects of divorce, because divorce gives someone permission to be permanently separated when that might not even be applicable to them, or divorce takes away property and children, and there may be an innocent person who has rights to everyday access to their children, and the children are losing everyday access to the person. Or divorce has no mercy on the person who, say someone has a drinking problem, or they have an anger problem, or they have an anxiety problem where they're freaking out all the time and it's just really, really difficult. Divorce courts don't care about helping that person. Whereas the church's response would be, you know what, you're actually married. God promises to bring graces. Let's everyone, cool off for a while here. Let's keep working. And, it's like any marital problem that there's been, someone's been through a similar problem and come out on the other side stronger. Layla Miller just talks about that, and it's like we need a different attitude.
Right.
That's.
Yeah, the church is about saving souls, and changing sinful behavior, and it'd be nice if they would apply that a little more firmly and directly. I think that's represented what you just said in a poll, a Pew poll that I had read recently, where only 21% of Catholics believe that divorce is immoral in a sin. That's incredible. Just 21% of the Catholic population believe that.
Yeah, and I'm still sharing my screen here. So, here it is. Divorce is immoral and a grave offense against nature. It's tolerable in situations determined in canon law. And I want to bring in a distinction. If someone is in imminent physical danger, of course, separate on your own authority. But that's different than going to the divorce court.
Right.
All the documents I have in my shelves behind me with my research findings is that Catholics were never intended to go to the divorce court without a church investigation first. Yes, you can separate in a case of extreme danger, but not divorce. And that was even back in the old days when divorces were also maybe only granted for permanent separations with adultery or something. There was another thing that kind of
tangled. Yeah, before we move on a little bit, Bay, I just want to tell your listeners that that type of behavior has never gone on in our relationship, our marriage relationship. There's been no infidelity, no adultery, no physical or verbal abuse at all. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah, and even if there was physical abuse or verbal, really nasty berating talk, even if there was, temporary separation and getting the right kind of help. So a wife should be doing everything she can think of, pleading, trying to find people to get her husband help. It's like, and these people just give up hope. There was another thing that kind of tangles with this, and you and I talked about this before we started recording, is, how is this happening in the church? And there's this practice that's been around for a while where churches, dioceses will tell people, well, if you question whether your marriage is valid and you think you have an invalid marriage and you think that you should get an annulment, you have to have a civil divorce first.
Right.
And then there's another challenge. I've got pulled up here an article that was in Catholic World Report, and I don't want to lose my spot if I zoom up and down, but the annulment nation. And the subheading was, the United States, with 6% of the world's Catholics, accounts for 60% of the church's annulments. And further down here, they talked about how in 1968, the United States had less than 350 annulments granted. Okay, so that's 1968. And then in 1991, there was 60,000. So it's like, what happened? So then in 2004, it went down a little bit to 46,000. In 2007, it's down to 35,000. So the reason I bring this up, there's been a sense that anyone who thinks they should get an annulment should get one. And on Mary's Advocates, I'm not going to bore readers by showing them, but I have a section under my research about annulment at the bottom of my table of contents where you can see the statistics that are reported to the Canon Law Society of America about how many annulments are granted, how many cases are decided for annulment or for marriage or against marriage. And it's like a third of the dioceses that share their statistics issue an annulment to every single petitioner. It's like, really? So if you're a priest and you live in one of those dioceses and you went to seminary and you had your one canon law class when you were in your grad program, and the professor was somebody who works on the tribunal, and all he knows is, oh, everyone who petitions for an annulment gets one, and our pastoral care for people who've experienced divorce is for them to go apply for their annulment and go find a new partner. Like, we've got that mindset going on in the United States right now, and at least maybe it's going down. I mean, I've heard some people it's going down some, but that also could be because people just aren't getting married anymore.
Right. Those statistics that you just quoted there are exactly what the Catechism was talking about, divorce becoming a plague and a contingent on society. And the no-fault divorce and the easy annulments just perpetuate the whole thing. They work hand in glove together.
And if, let's say your wife really believes you have an invalid marriage, well, then at the time of divorce, the reason for divorce wouldn't have been incompatibility. It would have been, oh, Mike had a previous wife when we got married. Our marriage is invalid. Or, oh, I'm suffering from a severe psychopathology, so I had a grave lack of discretion of judgment, which is Thomas Aquinas speak for I have a mental problem that makes me not be able to think clearly enough to understand things that healthy people can understand. And I can't understand permanence, openness to children, and sexual fidelity. I just can't wrap my mind around that. There's something broken about how my psyche works. But that's not what she was saying when she filed for divorce. But if there was a grounds for annulment, then why not have that explored at the time when parties are separating? Because it's relevant to justice. I mean, if someone really is that suffering in psychopathology, they should not be responsible for the upbringing of children's education and medical decisions. Maybe they shouldn't even be alone with the children if they've had that serious psychopathology. But from the things I've been reading about the annulment problem, annulments are being granted in such a way that it's not just, and it might not even be correct, and it's just a mess.
I agree. And not a few of the commentators in Lila's book have the same viewpoint. They don't understand how civil divorce would come before an annulment investigation. So.
Yeah, and what I'm finding is that it shouldn't. There's a process for separation of spouses for Catholics that should be happening before divorce. But that's all, that's all the practice that we hope would happen. And in the meantime, here you are, by next Wednesday, you might be met by county sheriffs who are going to say, excuse me, Mr. Dycus, but you've got to come with me.
That's a possibility and a probability, probably.
And you're feeling that you're standing up for marriage. And let them figure out what they're going to do about it. Wow. All right. Well, can you think of anything else that we didn't cover that you want to cover?
No, you've done a very good job, and I just appreciate you so much, Faye.
Oh, no. You've got it backwards. You've done a very good job. I appreciate you so much, Mike.
Well, thank you.
Wow. All right. Well, then I'm going to post that address so that if you really do end up going in jail, people can send you cards or ask someone to ship you a gift, but not that we can send you a gift correctly, or they can call the courthouse and find out if that's how it works there. So let's sign off for now.
Very good.
Okay.